Hello, everyone. Hello, Garbage Main, and thank you, Tyler, for having me. And
I think Tyler is amazing.
And it just makes me wonder, you're dead, bitch. You know, why are you doing this to this poor guy?
And I'm a fan of this show. I've watched several episodes and enjoyed it.
I go both ways. What do you think?
Archie Flyer, are you there, sir?
hello.
The homeless are a fucking huge problem.
And then right after that, you probably thought, well, I don't have it.
All right, let's go to another caller in Texas. Let's talk to Andrew. Andrew, thanks for calling.
Andrew.
Libertarian to Renaissance Fair pipeline.
Right. Yes, my maiden queen.
I gotta get more beer.
Okay. Harry, thank you.
Welcome, everybody, to the Libertarian Podcast Review. We played the Kill Pod intro for a good reason. One of those is because we're not going to do real heavy-duty stuff. We're not going to review a podcast. Well, we might review a little bit of a podcast, but we have a very special guest today. I'm pretty excited about this. If you've checked out this show ever, and you looked back in the archives, you saw that I did an early review of the Freeman Beyond the Wall podcast, Pete Quiñones, and he was more than gracious enough to come on and talk. So we're going to talk today, but not really about politics stuff. But so, the man that was just honored by the Canadian Parliament, welcome everybody, Pete Quiñones. How you doing?
I guess that, just a little bit of Ukrainian blood that I have is, goes right back to, I'm sure somewhere Stepan Bandera is in there.
By the way, you not came at me on Twitter, but I did a really stupid, and it was meant to be dumb, right? Which was about, and by the way, I hadn't done any real research other than I saw that there was an actual Nazi in Canada that they cheered on simply because he fought the Russians. So take out the Japanese. There's going to be a Nazi influence, wouldn't you say?
Well, I mean, if what you consider to be what Putin considers to be a Nazi is not somebody who hates, a certain select group of people, it's somebody who hates Russians, then yeah, I mean, there seem to be a lot of Nazis around, if you want to use that definition.
Well, I mean, like this guy, he was from World War II. He fought the Russians. So your only logical conclusion is, well, who was he associated with? That should have been some sort of vetting process that was just right at the top.
Yeah, people forget that the United States sided with, the Soviet Union. Before Stalin, who had just gone through the Red Terror, where he just killed people at random, and his officers were coming back from the Spanish Civil War, and they'd report into him, and he'd be like, "Oh, okay, thank you for your report. Take him out and shoot him." Yeah, I mean, he was just getting rid of everyone, and yeah, I mean, if you were somebody who got, were in the Ukrainian army, and you were in the Ukrainian army in World War II, you were a Nazi, technically, because you fought with them. You were a National Socialist because you fought with them. I don't know that these people held to the tenets of National Socialism or even right-wing socialism or anything like that. But, they have to be, if they're fighting alongside, then I guess, yeah, sure. But I mean, I thought it was great because it just really goes to show the fact that whoever did this, they either did this as a complete troll or they were so clueless because they just assumed that this guy was a part of the Azov, the version of the Azov battalion from back then, which would have been anti-Russian. And it just really, and I think another thing it goes to show is that people just don't know anything about World War II.
Right. Well, that is a problem. Let's look, and I don't really need to get into all this stuff, but since I have you on here, I just came across this, so I thought we'll play this. Sure. Partly because you're talking about it's a troll type of situation, but also think of how it's almost like Trump derangement syndrome, where anti-Russian, boom, they're going to just glob onto him, and then the immediate aftermath. So let's play this wonderful. This is great.
In a few moments, I will address the House in front of all Canadians, in front of Jewish people here and around the world, and Ukrainians, to offer Parliament's unreserved apologies for what happened on Friday. The Speaker was solely responsible for the invitation and recognition of this man and has wholly accepted that responsibility and stepped down. This was a mistake that has deeply embarrassed Parliament and Canada. All of us who were in this House on Friday regret deeply having stood and clapped, even though we did so unaware of the context. It was a horrendous violation of the memory of the millions of people who died in the Holocaust, and it was deeply, deeply painful for Jewish people. It also hurt Polish people, Roma people, 2S LGBTQI+ people, disabled people, racialized people, and the many millions who were targeted by the Nazi genocide.
So what got me, that could be an SNL skit, like, you know, in 1980 something, right? Where you're starting off a nice little apology, and next thing you know, you've gone to the extremes on who you're apologizing for. So look, here's what I find is they honored this guy. Now they're having to backpedal. It was no vetting to begin. It's to me, it's a hilarious situation. What's your take on it?
Well, like I said, I think it's so amazing that you actually get up there and it's like, well, this guy in World War II killed communists, and that was a bad thing. I mean, I'm sorry, that's my takeaway from it.
Right.
And then of course, you have to throw in every. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of transgender people in the camps and everything. And notice he left out Catholic priests, because there were Catholic priests, there were Lutheran priests in there too, who were against the Third Reich. Left all them out. You know, it's like, oh, he could have lumped them all in together. Although, you know, it wasn't like every Catholic priest and every Lutheran was in there. It was just the ones who opposed and worked against, were treasonous. I find it hilarious that the way I saw people reacting on Twitter to, I mean, it's like, if you make excuses for what this guy did, I mean, he fought for Hitler. You know, he worshipped Hitler. There are people just saying, well, he worshipped Hitler. You can't make any. It's like, how do you know that? I mean, how do you know that he even knew what Hitler looked like? You know, it's the most insane. I have a Substack coming out tomorrow, and it's just going to basically talk about how it's gotten to the point where they label people. Progressivism was all about, hey, people are born with a clean slate. We can turn them into perfect citizens. It's our fault if we don't. And it's gotten to the point now where they've worked so hard that it's not their fault anymore. They're not blaming themselves. It's just that some people are born bad. And if people who are born bad, like people who embrace Christ, people who embrace traditional values, people who care about their family, people who care about where they're from, I mean, these are all labeled as Nazis now. And since Nazis, you know, what did they do to the Nazis in the 40s? The ones they made a statement by giving them the rope. Now, anyone that they label as a Nazi, you just associate the rope with them. So it's okay to kill Nazis because Nazis are not, they're not people. They can't be, they're irredeemable in the progressive religion. So, I mean, that's pretty much where we are at this point. And that's what you saw that with that guy. I mean, the things that people were saying about him without even knowing who he was. I mean, What was his intention of being there? Was his intention of being there to be like, I'm totally trolling these people because, you know, I fought on the side of Hitler?
Yeah. Well, so look, Canada, I presume they gave him citizenship, right? So, I mean, if he's this evil person, he's a war criminal on the run. Why has he not been hunted down? And they can easily find him and bring him before Parliament. So these are human. Look, and what you say about calling everyone a Nazi, I mean, it does water down, right? But at this point, do we care anymore about names? I mean, the name calling that people do, it's simply to try to make it so they don't have to make arguments with you anymore. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think it's about making arguments. I think it's about dehumanizing people so that when it comes to the point, it's easy to kill us.
Okay.
Because we're not human.
Well, okay. That doesn't, I don't think that deflates what I said, because my intent, what I meant was,
yeah. I'm just saying it's worse.
Well, yeah,
you're right. It's
They
worse.
don't have to make arguments. Now they can just, punch a Nazi is fine, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So Pete, here's what I've followed you for years, and I've had a decent online relationship with you, and I'd love to meet you someday. By the way, my co-host Andy said he has met you at Childeberg. Said tell you hi. He's not able to be here today. But he's working or something like that. So good for him.
Good story, likely story.
Right. But what I thought was, what I've always held out with you is you came on, no matter our disagreements, I always liked that you came on my show right away and you were super nice to, 5 listeners that I had at the time. And so for me, I've always Pete's an upstanding guy and we can have differences completely fine. And I've seen you change over the years and I think it's wonderful. And so I wanted to talk kind of about that part. First of all, let's talk about your show to begin with. It was Freeman Beyond the Wall. Now it's the Pete Quiñones Show. And you've talked about the impetus of doing that, but what was wrong with the name in the first place? Or did you just want to have more Pete Quiñones tag to it? And then what's the reason? You can talk about that a little bit too.
Well, I mean, my name became a brand. I'd listen to podcasts and people would be like, well, Pete said the other day. And it's like, well, I guess everyone's supposed to know who Pete is. So let me just use my name. But what was more important to me is the name Freeman Beyond the Wall would, if you have a potential guest who doesn't know you or anything, like I'm working on a guest right now who has no idea who I am. And he's putting out a book and he's more like Claremont Institute kind of adjacent. And it's like, I don't want people to look at the name and be like, okay, what's this all about and everything like that. If they just see my name, it's probably less likely they're going to go digging and looking for episode titles too, Right, so, but no, it was all about one, having a brand, and then 2, just having it so that people weren't formulating in their mind what, trying to come up with, hey, what's this guy about, and asking questions. If you just have if you just use your own name and everything, Tom Woods, it's like Tom Woods can have pretty much anyone on and have a good conversation with them. He had Jordan Peterson on back in 2017, and he's had, Hans Herman Hoppe on back in the day. So he can run the gamut. He can have, normies on to talk about things. So it's like, I mean, I don't know how much I really have, what kind of conversation I got to have with a normie now, unless it was something really specialized, like a really specialized topic. But I wanted to be able to just talk to anybody. And, I think it's worked out better. I think having your name out there is... So
what you're saying is having Libertarian Podcast Review might narrow the scope of my reach. I get it, Pete. I get it.
Yeah, I'm thinking that when I read the title Libertarian Podcast Review, I'm pretty much have an idea what the show's about.
Right. I've changed a little bit of myself. By the way, when you talk about Tom, I went back through all his episodes and I did an 8 episode series of reviewing his show. And Ian Anderson, as an example, was number 2 guest that he had, which is
Michael
famous.
Bolden was number 1.
Michael Bolden was number 1. By the way, do you know who the most popular guest he's had on the show is?
Michael Malice.
It was it was Scott Horton, actually.
Oh, okay.
And then
Scott Horton. Remember, you said earlier, I had 5 people watching my show, and you came on. Scott Horton was the one who taught me that. He said, "Don't turn anyone down." He goes, "You never know who you're going to reach. If there's 3 people listening, you never know who you're going to reach. You don't know whether you're going to influence the next, Ron Paul, or you're going to have, you possibly could have your biggest supporter, your biggest financial supporter, come out of that." So
have you, and you don't have to say names, but I'm sure doing some of these shows, it's been an hour of cringe for you as well, though. Or have you not had any bad experiences?
No, I mean, I think the worst podcast. I've recorded a podcast in the last 6 months that I didn't release. I wasn't comfortable releasing it. I don't think I've ever been on a podcast where I've regretted doing it. there's always something to talk about with somebody, you know, even if it just turns into me, you know, delivering a sermon or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I had not an attorney, but I had a reporter, a mainstream reporter on back in the day who wrote a book about the Bundy Ranch, and I'm pretty sure it was him. And I ended up going at him. Like he started defending the mainstream media and everything like that. And I'm just like, yeah, that ain't gonna happen. That ain't happening on this show, bud. And I never, you know me, you've listened to my show. When do I ever argue with guests?
I was just going to say that's one thing I just don't see you doing, or even, you know, and I know like Malice he's talked about this, and you probably have too, where you have someone on, he just had Cenk Uygur on, and Uygur or whatever you pronounce his name. And I listened to it, and I actually stopped about 2/3 of the way through, because I was just like, he's just full of it. And people I'm sure are mad because Malice isn't pushing back, but that's not the show. It's not a debate show. And sometimes, you know, you do a really good job. What is your prep for bringing a person on? And is it different from when you're doing your book reading stuff to, you know, a bigger intellectual guest, or do you do much prep on these?
It depends. It just depends who it is. You know, if I'm interviewing Ron Paul, I have a list of questions, and I stick to the list of questions. Thomas 777 is just like, hey, Thomas, how are you doing? We're going to talk about this today. Go. It's basically like interviewing Scott Horton. Right. You know, you sit back, smoke, you know, and just let them go. Right. But you know, there are like, if like Paul Fahrenheit and I are reading Yaki, I will go back and I will read over the passage we're doing, and I'll take notes for it. And if I think, because something, you know, it's like Imperium by Yaki is really important to me. It's become like my favorite political text. So when I put that information out there, I want to try and let people understand what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling when I read this. So, yeah.
Great. So you've made some changes over the last few years in your life, politics, marriage, kind of moving around. Why don't you tell me, and a few other things. So I've listened to you so much. I feel like I know you. So we're gonna pick and prod at a few. One of these
days we'll get together.
So here's the deal. I live out in the West, you know,
I know.
Piece of shit out here. But I'm going to be making some moves someday. We're planning on moving out your direction more. But in the meantime, we'll take some trips out there. My wife and I definitely want to come see people and obviously meet up. And tell me, let's go into that a little bit. So what's your experience like meeting fans of the show, or people, because I know you were consolidated in the libertarian movement, and you're not so much now. Is there a community that's kind of I'm on the edge of the libertarians, but I'm not, but I'm, you know, and how are you still accepted in that party?
Well, I mean, when I go to libertarian events, if I do go, everything's fine. No one really, I mean, I think I went to Childerberg this year, and, you know, Childerberg is mostly, like, I would say libertarian, two-way and crypto. There was only one person who gave me like a really shitty look as I was leaving and everything like that. You know, it's like, it just gave me a look like, and I'm just like, okay. Yeah, I was going to bring that up, Andy.
Who's Amron?
American Renaissance. So my first foray into, like, I guess what you would call dissident right politics, or I mean, just basically, you know, the politics of forbidden politics is I think it was last month. Yeah, it was last month or August. Yeah, it was last month. It was August. American Renaissance was having, that's Jared Taylor's organization.
Okay. I heard you mention that. Okay.
Yeah, they had a conference in Nashville, and I wasn't going to go. I wasn't going to go at all. But Thomas said he was going to go. And so I was like, all right, I haven't hung out with Thomas and everything. We've done 50 plus episodes together. We text all the time. So, you know, I had a chance to go and hang out, and, you know, there were a lot of people there who, like, you know, knew who I was, listened to the show. Keith Woods was there, and, you know, he was like, I like your show, especially the episodes with Thomas. And I got to meet Greg, what's his name, from Amron. Well, he goes by so many names. But I got to meet all these really cool people, and everybody was just so cool. Everybody dressed to the, you can't go to any event there or any of the meetings without like a jacket and tie. So, we had a good time. And the first night we all went down into Nashville and partied, but that was just a great event with great people. Everybody was really cool, really good conversations. I got to hang out with Z-Man, with Christopher Z-Man, and from the Z blog. And we had some great, we're only a couple years apart, so we had some really good conversations. And, everyone I had a chance. I met Mark Weber, who's somebody who I've been reading his articles since 1998. Never thought I would get a chance to meet him, from the Institute for Historical Review. And I met a bunch of people who knew who I was. And it's always good. I've never really had any problems anywhere I've went for anything. Usually, but what's funny is the events usually people know me the least is any Ron Paul event. It's funny, like Ron Paul, if it's a Ron Paul sponsored thing, I can go there and there'll be people who know me, but I can pretty much get lost in the crowd, and that's pretty cool.
Are you ever worried about, and I know the answer probably already, about getting tainted with, like Jared Taylor? He probably doesn't have the best name recognition. Is there any concern about that rubbing off on you, or do you just don't really give a shit?
Well, I don't really care anymore. I'm not going to have Jared on the show just because I don't. There are some things I don't agree with him on, and I don't want those things to come up and then possibly get in an argument or something. Get heated. But also, it seems like whenever Jared goes on a podcast, that podcast gets targeted by everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. When did you, when growing up, did you have with politics in your home? So what point in your life did you start to get into politics?
Like JFK was like my grandmother had a portrait of JFK on the wall. That's my mom's mom. My dad, I was born in Germany. My dad was in the military. And my dad really didn't have politics up until, I really didn't know what my dad's politics were up until Reagan. And Reagan was like basically a hero in the home. So, now I get to look back and see just exactly how cringe Reagan was on a lot of important things. But that was it. It was like during the 80s, it was hearing about Reagan and we're a Reagan household. And then the 90s came around and I started like being in bands and playing in music, and I was completely apolitical. I didn't really care about what was going on through the whole thing. And 9/11 basically brought me into politics, and I started paying attention, looking at foreign policy, things like that. And then 2007, Ron Paul, and then just ran from there. Yeah.
So growing up, when you've got these. You say, you're in a band, there's not much politics around. Do you think it's more political for kids nowadays than like it was for us? Because I don't remember too much. And even then, it's like, I lived in a college town, and, my friends their parents were all lefties or Democrats, and my parents weren't. So there was, but, it didn't really seem to matter as much. What do you think that perception and the reason is now?
The internet. The internet just makes everything, all the information's right there. And, propagandists use the internet, use social media well to make everyone political. Yaki talked about in Imperium how, the average person shouldn't care about politics, shouldn't care about economics, shouldn't care about that should just be something that's on the periphery. They should be concentrating on family, on the home, and work. And basically when you have, he talked about when you have a total state, every bit of your life becomes political. And I think that's where we are right now. I think a lot of people do a really good job of resisting it. I do a pretty good job of resisting it when I'm not doing this, when I'm not talking about it, I'm like, oh, the cattle out, the neighbor's cattle look great and everything. Oh, I need to contact my buddy because I need some eggs from his chicken house and stuff. I just concentrate on stuff like that. But that's really what we should be concentrating on. The average farmer at the time of the founding, didn't really care about the Articles of Confederation or the fact that it was basically scrapped for the Constitution. They were just busy living their lives, and it's the way people should be. But everything has to be about politics now, and we live in that absolute age. That we live in the age of absolute politics, where there's nothing in your life that can't be made political.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So exactly true. And I've even mentioned this on a stream with you once before, and you don't have to remember it, but it came to, I remember hearing a guy that I used to listen to when I lived in Colorado talk about, like, when he was older than me. So, going to school, he was going to college, he was going to the football games, and, the other ones were protesting, right? The left and the right. The difference was, he just had a normal life going about his business, and the ones that were really involved in politics were way too busy to do other things. And that's kind of the generic take, which is, the right's going to work and the other ones are not, or whatever it is. And so I think you're right. And the most important thing, look, as we know, politics isn't going to leave us alone, but when we focus on our kids, our wives, our family, that's the most healthy thing to do. And I think everyone is so over the top on all this. Is there a way that you would suggest trying to remove yourself from the politics? And then, like, if you run into friends that are way over the top with this that you don't agree with, is there suggestions for that?
I mean, I don't really know. People just seem to be so caught up in politics now that when you get together, that's all a lot of people want to talk about. Not having, my wife and I not having kids, we aren't around other family. It's not so much that we aren't around families that have kids, but when we get together, we don't have that thing in common to talk about. So then people ask me what I do, and automatically, as soon as people ask me what I do, the politics is going to start flying. So, I really think that people should just, I don't know, people do a really good job when I go to church of not talking about it.
Well, that's good. That's positive, right?
Yeah.
You've recently gone back to church. Is that the?
Well, it was. I was away for a very long time because I was raised Roman Catholic. I went and graduated Catholic school and fell away, and then in my late 20s, I started going to a Baptist church, and I was baptized into a Baptist church. And I spent like 5 years. I attended seminary. I did a Protestant seminary, and the amount of infighting and the amount of just schism, protest, splintering, just wore on me to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I ended up getting married and at that time, right around that time, and moving away. And so I lost touch with my church family at that point. And I didn't start going to church again until I met my wife, my wife now. And we were living in Auburn for a while, but we knew we were going to be leaving. So we just found a church that we were happy with and would go there, but we knew we weren't going to stay. And we've been looking for a church here. But in the meantime, while we were looking for like a Baptist church, because that's like literally like 90% of the churches in rural Alabama are going to be Baptist. There is a small Catholic church here. And I started going to mass during the week there. I went to confession for the first time in decades, and took communion for the first time in decades. And that's something that I'm probably going to stick doing. While it's a very, very, very small church. I mean, you can imagine it's not a lot of Catholics in rural Alabama. Right. So for community's sake, finding a Baptist church so we can be around people and, get to know people and build trust and try to build community, become a part of the community. While we do that, then I'll still be going to the Catholic Church during the week so that I can go to confession and partake in the Lord's Supper. So
Did you ever turn, like, were you a non-believer at all, or were you just transferring from kind of one religion, trying to find your way?
I mean, I was during the 2010s, from like 11 to 14. I studied Islam, not Islam, Hinduism. And then there was when I was living in Atlanta, there was a big Buddhist temple there, and I started going there because I had learned I'd started meditating in like 2007, 2008, and I was like, oh, I want to see how they, how these, hardcore, I mean, like there were monks there who were from Tibet. And I was like, okay, I want to see how they meditate and everything. So I went there for a while and I studied there for a while. But I mean, that's not I don't really. I kind of consider it to be kind of cringe when Westerners and especially Americans adopt Eastern religions.
Yes.
Yeah, it's and not only Hinduism and other religions that have Eastern in the title too. Yeah. But the it just really I needed somebody to I knew when I was single, living in Auburn before I met my wife, that I should be going to church and everything, but it was just I didn't want to go alone.
Did you, before you met your wife, or you're thinking like, hey, this is, I want to find a spouse, was church and religion kind of a thought that you like, hey, this is someone at least open-minded to this, or was it like they need to be or not, or was this a kind of a parameter in your search?
Well, I mean, in between being married, in between marriages, I dated a couple people, and definitely the people who didn't, had no interest in church. There were a couple that had no interest in church, and that was, that was something that was kind of what I wanted. I wanted to find someone to, to share my values with, and especially over the last couple of years, last 2.5 years, my values have strengthened and become more I'm looking for the right word, concrete maybe. They've just unbendable. I'm not willing to bend on them at all, and so it sort of got to the point where I was like, I got to meet somebody who shares that, at least has that in common. And I did. And that was great. Then it's just, a matter of trying to find a church and what all of that entails. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've had similar, probably different time spans from you, marriage, dating, and another one. And there's that wasteland where you're trying to figure out what's going on in between, and, may not be the best person or whatever, but I think that's also important if you come out of it. And this is one thing I do try. I'm not a tradcon type at all. I don't really know what that even means, but I'm very pro finding that right person and, sharing your specific values, that underlying values of, especially if it's religion. I think that's important. Then you can build off, because shit's going to hit the fan in your life. It's not always going to be easy. Between the two of you, I just had some stuff here. Someday I'll talk about it with my law firm. And if I didn't have a great wife in this whole prospect, I mean, it would ruin us. So that's very important. And I think it's one, plus we have kids, and it's good to show that as well. So one, I just want to say congrats, for where you're at. And I like to see this, and I see it as a positive growth, Pete, with you. Not that I even know you enough to say it, but I think it's always good when people are doing, I think, affirmative things in their lives, and showing them to other people. Well, do you feel that with your fan base?
Yeah, I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've made public mistakes too, and that, just the loss of trust. People don't realize when you're going through personal stuff that, one thing about going through personal stuff and doing it on, especially on like social media and on Twitter, is you quickly find out who's been waiting to celebrate.
Yeah,
you going through hardship, and you find out who, even people you haven't met before, you find out who your real friends are. You find out who's really on your side, and that's more important, because we're not going to get everything right in life. We're going to be wrong a lot of times, and there has to be that ability to come back from it and say sorry. Especially if no one was hurt. No one was hurt significantly. We make poor decisions sometimes, and we have a lack of discernment, and that's probably one of the things that I've tried to work on the hardest in the last 2 years, in the last 18 months to, since the beginning of last year, is just to have better discernment about my decisions, the words that come out of my mouth, my associations, things like that. I mean, I still get shit on for my associations. I still have people who are like, I see comments as like, yeah, I mean, but Pete talks to Thomas 777. It's like,
is he troublesome? I don't know enough. I've heard him on your stuff, and I just heard him on Mark Claire's. But
I mean, he's like one of the coolest people I've ever met. We hung out. I mean, he's he has a bone disease which causes him to sometimes walk with a cane. He's frail, but he's probably one of the smartest people I know. He's very charming. He's very to use an ancient term, square. He's like a square, and he's gone through his own troubles too. And I respect him for being able to pull himself out of what was hell. If you listen to Mark's episode, you know what he went through. And just meeting him and hanging out with him and just seeing how he carries himself. I mean, he's an inspiration for somebody who went through all that. And it's when people judge him because he's unapologetic about being a fan of the National Socialist regime in the 20th century in Germany. It's like I don't care. It's like, I mean, I'm not a fan of the Bolsheviks, but I've read I've read communist literature on my podcast, and probably agreed with 80% of it. And if people want to judge me for that, I really don't care. So I mean, it's just we're at a stage where people are judged by what they read and what they what opinions they have, no matter whether those opinions could ever materialize into become reality or not. This country is never going to be a National Socialist country, and I think people who are National Socialists actually know that. They just look at it and they're like, okay, this was something that was trying to do something that was something that I agree with. And if that makes them bad people, well, I mean, that's your opinion. I think what makes someone a bad person is not so much what they believe, but how they act and what their motivations are.
But what the interesting part is, you can't be in politics or whatnot now and not demonize the other side. So the right goes, they see something happen, instantly it's commie. The Daily Wire is putting out non-woke chocolate. The other side, everyone's a Nazi. So it's the only way that you really go about this way, Pete. So you can't have nuance.
Well, and I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. When it comes to what I believe, I am. Yeah, I think I'm right wing. I mean, I'm anti-egalitarian. I'm pro-hierarchy. I'm pro-punishment. I'm pro using the state to crush people who do evil, because I think it's the greatest weapon. You don't leave if you're on the battlefield and you've lost your weapon, and you're somebody, the best weapon, a Sturmgewehr, during World War II is laying on the ground. I'm going to pick that weapon up and use it to defeat my enemies. And right now, the greatest thing to defeat child mutilators and child groomers and pedophiles and rapists is the power of the state. It's not libertarianism. I'm sorry. I will argue that all day long. Live and let live is not going to defeat people who won't let you live and let live. And since libertarians don't realize that. I mean, maybe they have these American Revolution type of fantasies in the back of their mind, but no one's picking up their guns.
What, and I'm not going to get into a big debate with you on this because I don't know that I necessarily disagree either. What is what do you think about national divorce? First of all, just as a concept and any practicality.
Well, I think it's the perfect answer. I think people should be able to go off and form polities in whichever way they can to match up to their values. I mean, I don't want like ghetto blacks moving into Amish country and telling Amish people what to do.
What do you think of, because I was going down a route the other day and I started to think about the 14th Amendment. Brian McClanahan talks about incorporation a lot. And if I'm thinking, I was like, if we just remove that, it's almost like soft divorce.
Tyler,
in a sense.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever see anarchism in your lifetime?
No.
Do you think you'll see do you think there'll be anarchism within the next 200 years?
No. No.
Then what do you think is the point of talking about anarchism?
I'm just, because here's where I kind of differ on this. One, I'm a realist as far as my life, right? As an example, I may not think that the government should be involved in marriage, but I'm a family law attorney, and I don't go and tell my clients, hey, what would be great is if we didn't have, because it doesn't make sense. I have to live in the world that I am, and I understand that. Now, I grew up as a right winger. I'm sick of all that. I don't want anything more to do with it. What the best thing?
Well, they're not right wingers, so that's like.
I understand, Pete. So I have ideals in my mind, much like the religion, and I don't want to compare it to religion because that's obviously a problem. But I have ideals for what I want to be, for my spiritual life. It's not always practical or it's not always happening, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't prefer this to be the case. Same with my politics in a sense. It doesn't mean that I'm just giving up, or maybe who I vote for or whatnot. I try to deal with things locally, but it doesn't mean that philosophically this isn't something that I would prefer if it's ever going to happen. Now, what am I really doing about it? I have a podcast that I like to make jokes. We have fun, and the best thing that Libertarian and you did for me though was helps me with the media. And what I mean by that is I used to be, not even the media, it's mostly the parties. Your party comes out, they tell you Bosnia is bad. Next thing you know, this one is good. And you're just going along the route to what it is. And I was caught up in that. And when I started to follow libertarian stuff more, my ideas were, I'm not listening to a party. I'm going to start making up my own mind. So for me, that's given me some insight. Now, what does that really practically mean for me? I don't know, Pete. I'm out here in a wasteland.
Well, I mean, I'm not attacking you. This is
fine.
This is for the benefit of anybody who's watching or listening to this. I mean, what good is consent, worrying about consent, when the people who rule over you don't worry about it?
Yeah, look, I understand that, but how am I also going to live in my community, right?
Right.
So I'm not out there.
I mean, if the DEA wanted to come in and raid your house and take your guns,
oh, Pete, I'd yell, "Get a warrant!"
and your local sheriff wanted to stand in their way and say you're not allowed to do that here, would that be something? Would that be him doing his job and maybe even doing something a little bit heroic?
I would feel so. Yeah.
Yeah. Does his job allow him to do things where he doesn't always have the consent of the person who the consent? I mean, or is there sometimes, is somebody innocent going to get hurt by law enforcement, by the state, by anything like that? Yeah. Do you think that we're at the point in history where we can exist without law enforcement?
I don't. We're seeing that it's devastating to a lot of cities, right?
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
that's it. That's all. I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, that's the practicality of it. We're not, look, I totally, and by the way, this is even something you talk about.
I'm just doing this because I'm on a libertarian podcast, and libertarians want to talk about consent and they want to talk about morality. And that's fine. That's fine. I mean, but the fact that the people that don't like you, that would like to remove you from this planet, don't care about morality. And
but do you care about morality?
Yeah, of course I care about morality.
So then how does that dictate your actions? I understand the other side, but I mean, we're not just going out there and,
Well, it dictates it in this way, is that if I had the power to do so, if I had the power of Ron DeSantis or Joe Biden, these people would no longer be walking the streets. I would crush them under my feet. I mean,
what does that look like?
What does that look like? It looks like going to New Mexico and removing people from Indian reservations and now using those Indian reservations to house these people with an electric fence around it. And that's the way they get to live the rest of their lives because of all the damage that they've done. And if that makes me a statist, it's also going to make me a hero in a lot of people's eyes.
Sure.
And the people who scream about consent use the term statist and use the term morality. Go fuck yourselves. I'd rather do the right thing than stand by and just scream morality and consent from the sidelines.
Do you think that, so are you against due process in this case? I mean, because you're just saying at this point, I'm taking a shotgun approach to literally.
I mean, does Anderson Cooper need a trial?
Well, it depends on what, I mean, look, I would say,
I mean, all of these people have lied us. All the people who lied us into the wars, do they get a trial? I mean, we have the video footage of them doing it for years and years.
So that's not going to happen, though. We know that, right?
Oh, it will if we get the right people in charge.
Who was that? Who's that going to be? Who do you see out there that's going to be doing this?
I don't know.
So I tend
it's going to have to be someone who comes out of nowhere, because you can't have someone like me who, I run for office and it's obvious where my feelings are. I say them all the time. It's going to have to be someone. It's like talking to some of the guys from the Christian nationalist guys. They realize that if they're going to get their quote unquote Protestant Franco, it's going to have to be someone who comes out of nowhere and probably just basically surprises everyone.
Do you think that's going to happen though? To me, it always feels like that's as likely as the libertarian moment.
Well, I agree with you, but I think that what we're seeing now is because we're seeing left-wing authoritarianism grow so much that there eventually is. I mean, I don't know if it happens in our lifetime or anything, or if I was texting with Scott the other day and I told him it's either going to be collapse. It's going to be. I think we're either looking at collapse, left or right. There's three things: collapse, left or right-wing libertarianism. If we have collapse, I think the only way we survive that is through like secession. Is breaking it up and having people. It's one of the things I'm trying to talk about locally here, trying to get industry back in here, manufacturing, into Alabama especially. But I think we're only headed in one direction, and I think we're living in an age of authoritarianism, and I think that's the only way we go forward. And it's either going to be left or right. So
that to me is very interesting because. Yes, I would like to not have that, right? I would like to be able to.
Of course.
Do
I don't think any of us. I think every one of us would just like to fucking grill, right? I mean, that's
exactly.
We want to live our lives in peace and not have anyone fuck with us. But
so you're basically saying, look, I'm this egg on top of a hen house, and I'm either going to roll one. It's only two options, right? Roll one way or the other way. That's what you're indicating.
Yeah, libertarianism is not going to win.
Libertarians holding it. What
libertarianism can't win. I mean, because they're not willing. They're not yet willing to use they're not willing to use the only legitimate force that exists in the world right now, and that's the state. And when I say it's the only legitimate force, that doesn't mean metaphysically I think it's the only legitimate force. It's the only legitimate force that most of the population looks at and says, okay, that's legitimate. That's why I'm one of these people who's like, move to a small town and, run for office. It's more important. I'd rather have like someone who has my values run for sheriff than run for mayor, because the sheriff can do a lot more. I'd like
problem,
to.
You're still going to have and here's the problem with that is a prime example out in Washington, a sheriff, there was a mag limit, and they had changed it, and there was a shop owner that he wasn't quite sure if this was legit or not, and the sheriff came out and said, we're not enforcing it, don't worry about it. So he sold a bunch of mags over like 10 or what, I don't know what the law was out there.
Right.
The attorneys general then files a consumer protection action against this owner of this munitions, selling firearms and whatever, and it's a fine of like $2,500 per magazine. It comes out to millions and millions of dollars. So what he's essentially done is eliminated this guy as if you're criminally prosecuting him. So you have a sheriff. And so I don't know what the solution is, other than I'm just telling you a story of a sheriff did the right thing, and you still have crap that is in Olympia.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, but I'm talking about things have to be as small as possible. I live in a town of 2,400 people, and there's there's multitudes times chickens here and cattle than there is people. We don't have problems here. One of the reasons we don't have problems too is because this county doesn't have any federal roads going through it. And we basically are not. When I go to other parts of the state and I tell people where I live, they have no idea where I live, and that was done on purpose.
Yeah.
It was like my own personal secession, where I could come here and I could basically not live off the grid. I mean, I have electricity, obviously, I have everything, but one statement I would like to make is that there's this common trope amongst midwits that if you grow the state, any way you use to grow the state, that'll be used against you in the future. Well, the left is doing that right now. So are you just letting them, unless you have a libertarian plan to stop the left from doing what they're doing right now, which there isn't one, then something needs to be done now, and you worry about the future when you get to the future. I mean, so
is this kind of a like as an example, Trump's being prosecuted like crazy, which is kind of the left is going after him for whatever reason. Do you feel that the answer then should be, and I've said it should be, that local DAs, they need to start going after the other side until you almost have a point of mutually assured destruction that they maybe pull themselves back?
I don't see that happening. Well, I mean, well,
you don't see it happening, but is that a possible?
I think the right counter? I think the right would do it. The right would pull back before the left would. The left's not going to pull back on anything. I mean, you can say what you want about like right-wing power and starting wars and stuff like that. Yeah, sure, they were mutilating kids by sending them overseas, but the left was right on board with them. I mean, they were not. It wasn't like they were standing up against the wars. It was just the right was in power. But was the right in power? Who really? I mean, if anything, the Trump presidency taught us that we don't see the power. The power is unspoken. I mean, Trump couldn't get anything done. People. I tell people that. I tell Trump people that. I'm like, Trump was in there for 4 years. He couldn't get anything done. He goes, well, he was stopped every turn. He was stopped. He was accused of something. I'm like, yeah, by the people who have the power. Right. The president doesn't have power. Does the Congress have power? An old lady whose face is falling off, does she have power? I mean, these people who No, this is something that exists outside of this political, the facade that we see. Politics is the facade. There's something else controlling this power, and that's what needs to be addressed. And Trump mentioned it, and as soon as he mentioned it, they immediately went on the attack. Call it the deep state, or call it, the unelected bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it. But they're the ones who are in charge. That needs to be destroyed. How does that get destroyed? I don't know that it can be. I think it might have to destroy itself. But I think the only logical thing for people to do at this point is localism. Localism, taking care of yourself, building up your, getting a piece of property or something that you can grow food on, and maybe moving to a place where it has really small, where you can actually influence the power that's there, and maybe even get elected to your school board. And I know that libertarians and anarchists want to scream, just homeschool. Well, yeah, but 95% of the population isn't homeschooling. They're going to become progressive soldiers. And in 10 years, your nice kid who you've taught that politics is immoral, well, they're going to kill him. They're going to kill them, or they're going to enslave them completely.
What would you suggest then? So my kids weren't homeschooled. They went out there in the wild. And I must say, at some point, I expect them to be put in jail for thought crimes, because they're very much... they push back on authority and everything. So, but they're good kids. What do you think is a solution? Having them out there, maybe trying to have them, hardened against the bad schools themselves, or protected at home in the homeschool thing?
In the meantime, I think that homeschool parents should. I think people should, if they can, homeschool their kids. But they are still, if they're property owners, they are still paying for local schools. I think they should run for school board and get together a bunch of like-minded people and run for school board, and basically take over the school board, kick out, change the curriculum, and institute something that looks more like what we would want the curriculum to be.
I would agree. I had a question for you here. So look, Pete, you went back. We were talking about taking politics out, and then look where we end up here. But
because politics is, one thing I learned from reading Carl Schmitt is politics is, it's everything. It's a theology. It's basically politics is the national religion, and it's a constant fight. It's a constant battle going back and forth, which is why libertarians are just basically they're not even cornermen. They never get into the ring. If you're not in the ring fighting and using the power and using all the, I would say this: libertarians and anarchists, I think most of them, the ones who don't want to use political power, are some of the biggest pieces of shit I've ever met in my life. First of all, you're immoral. Okay, you say that you have an idea of how to create this world where there's going to be less human suffering, less war, there'll be more prosperity, all of these things you say, yet you won't use. You're going to allow death and destruction to go on because you're too fucking cowardly to pick up, to get the power of the state and actually change it and institute a libertarian order. Fuck you, literally, fuck you. You allow this shit to happen because you have all these great ideas that you think work, and you're not willing to fucking get them done. Fuck you. That's why I don't call myself a libertarian. I don't care about consent. When I hear a libertarian talk about consent, all I think is age of consent.
That's true. What do you then agree with the Michael Knowles and a few of the others that say they say that the reason the GOP is the state that they are is because they are too influenced by libertarians, or that the libertarian movement has somehow pushed this on us?
I think that Republicans are influenced by neoliberalism. And I think neoliberalism used a lot of the worst ideas of libertarianism to basically, we have there's no tariffs, tariffs that's just going to raise the prices of everything. It's like, okay, so now China makes everything that you have, including your pharmaceuticals. So now you have a state that could possibly be genociding a certain group of people. Patrick McFarland at Libertarian Institute thinks that that's way overblown. I tend to agree with him, but this
you argued it on Tim Pool's, all right?
I argued it on Tim Pool. I think I still agree with that position that I argued. But do you really want a country that is of basically atheists to who have their only morality is in their whatever their 15,000 year history is based in, to control your economy? I mean, Steve Bannon talked about this in War for Eternity, where he was in Harvard Business School in the 1980s, and Harvard Business School was the one who was pushing, who was basically going to be graduating all the future CEOs, that you want to send all your manufacturing to China because in China they can manufacture it cheaper, and even shipping it back over here would still be cheaper. I mean, I would rather have we had for what, 2.5 years now, you drive by a car lot and you don't really see new cars on it. You see used cars because there's a quote unquote chip shortage because they're made in Taiwan. Why can't chips be made in Alabama?
Well, so and then, by the way, I'm not an economist. I don't even play one.
Yeah. I'm not either. I think economics is fake and gay. And anyone who wants to base their society around economics, I think you're insane.
So I heard Cyprian. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I heard Cyprian say once when asked about economics, he said economics is everything. Is that not? And maybe I misunderstood him, but is that not is that not part of the equation?
Well, economics should just be like what we're doing now is just interaction. Saying that, but the whole point of we have to have we have to have a free market no tariffs, no I mean, that's labor too is involved in that. So I mean, I love when ANCAP say, well, no, in ANCAPistan you couldn't just have people, everything's private property. No one will be moving everywhere they want. You have a free market on labor. I guarantee you the companies in existence will destroy that in 5 seconds, because they're going to want whatever labor they want. And if that labor is 2,000 miles away, they're going to figure out a way to be like, fuck your private property. I'm getting the cheapest labor possible to come in here. That's what they do now. It will happen then. That's another argument I love that libertarians and ANCAPs make. You're just describing a problem now. Yeah, and why wouldn't that be? That's not an argument. If it's a problem now, why wouldn't it be a problem then? And if it's going to be a problem then, why wouldn't you try to figure out how to solve it now? But it's because it's all the state. Another libertarianism is just Christianity without Christ, and the state is Satan. You blame everything on the state instead of blaming it on human nature or blaming it on fallen man, which is what you should be doing. And then you realize that there's with fallen man, you can't just have everybody running crazy and loose and
How do you feel about your documentary now?
Oh, I think it does a really good job of proving that just very few sections of that actually are applicable. Tom Woods talking about secession, talking about decentralization. I think those are important. I think the parts about covenant communities where Ryan McMakin talked about how you would be giving up some of your rights so that you could come together with people of like mind to be safe. I love that he said giving up some of your rights, because that's exactly what you'd be doing. That's exactly what people would have to do in order to be safe and to be in, or else you're in chaos. You're in chaos. I mean, it's the documentary is great. I think it was another thing it shows is that like Chiron, this anarchist city in Mexico, that just happens to exist at the whim of the Mexican government, and they can destroy it anytime they want. Just goes to show that is that, you know, if you do have a, you know, why does Liechtenstein work? Liechtenstein works, one, because they have really good leadership. They have incredible leadership. And two, they're in the middle of a Western country. They're not, I mean, the only country that really could invade them without like an all-out scale of war is Germany, because that's the company that immediately is around their borders. So I think there's a lot in that documentary that's very, very useful. But I also think there's a lot of cautionary tales in it.
I got a few little oddball questions here, but it pertains, I think, to exactly this conversation that we're having here, which is one, I just say you're Pete. You're exactly, you say what you feel, and you've made changes in your life, and you still feel. What does it mean to be? And I don't mean this in the Matt Walsh type of thing, but what does it mean to be a man?
That's just a really weird question. I mean, I immediately want to go to metaphysics and say, I mean, our first rule is to glorify God. And that's the first thing that man is supposed to do. Is also supposed to get married and have kids. I did the first one. I didn't do the second one. I failed in that. But I've taken care of, you're supposed to take care of the women and keep them safe that are under your stead. And I think I've done a really good job of doing that. And I also think it is to try and leave a better world than the one, you know, a more, in my case, I would say not a better world, but whatever my little corner of the world is, have it be safer, and have it be, that more people would be focusing on Christ and the church.
And by the way, whether you think it's weird or not, I actually think it's important, especially in our space that we're in here, because there's a lot of people, and it can be as simple as I've been in parts of my life, I would say my previous marriage, where I don't think I was a great man in a sense, right? I have kids, I was kind of pushed over, and there's things you can do. And I'd just say, for me, it's about learning your role in your family, your Christ-centered, whatever it is, and even just learning to do projects. You've moved out in the country. I live out kind of in the city, but we have acreage here. We have chickens. Oh, cool. It's about even building a chicken coop for your wife, doing little things. And if you have an apartment, maybe it's even just figuring out how to hang up stupid pictures and stuff on the wall. Sometimes it's just about doing these little things. And so for me, it's I was just interested in what you had to say about it, and because I think I've seen you as a person and where you are in your life, exuding what you think is a man, and I don't think there's a doubt about that.
I mean, it's a hard question. I mean, I think everything comes down to family. I think everything comes down to loved ones. I mean, that's all I really care about anymore, you know. And I think that once people have loved ones, they're willing, you know, it's like I've talked to so many libertarians that had like, you know, who were like hardcore ANCAPs, and then they had kids, and they were like, I will like murder the whole planet to keep these kids safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like, I love talking to those people, because I just came to the conclusion that I try to be very practical. So when it comes to like politics, I don't want to talk about something. I don't want to advocate for something that has no chance of manifesting in reality.
So what do you label yourself as, or do you?
I mean, I don't
or is it even
know.
important to do so anymore?
I mean, I don't really know. I think that, you know, I think that right wing is like anti-egalitarian and believes in hierarchy, believes in structure, believes in order. I mean, I care about order. You know, that's the worst thing. If the summer of 2020 should have taught anyone anything, is that order can break down really quick, can break down really fast. You know, I mean, 40 Americans that we know of were murdered in the streets in 2020, and nobody really talks about them. You know, they only talk about the fentanyl head who kicked it all, you know, was the excuse for kicking it all off. And then the pedophile, the wife beater, and the thief in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, without order. I mean, I don't understand how anyone who's a libertarian doesn't realize that without order, you're not going to get. You can't have what you want. I mean, I just want order. At this point, I don't care if the economics of the country, what the economics of the country are, as long as my friends are in charge and running it, people who are, you know, share my values run it. I mean, I care more about just waking up and being able to look outside the front door and know that violence is not going to manifest itself and that order will be there. And I don't think that a patchwork of private properties with a bunch of people who own guns but have never shot them is going to keep order. You know, or people who own guns and have shot them, but if the time comes to take a human life, which I've never done, and I don't know if I'd ever do, I don't know whether I'd be able to do it. These people don't know whether they'd be able to do it, even protecting their own families. Yet they, you know, the concept of Chesterton's fence, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why take it down if you don't know what the reason it was up for?
Yeah. Don't tear something down unless you know why the original people put it up. I mean, to me, that's the state. I think it's one of the reasons why I don't get why libertarians who call for the ending of the state don't get targeted, because no one takes libertarians seriously. But somebody who talks like I do, if I started talking about destroying the state, I could understand them wanting to target me, because I talk about real political power. I talk about using the methods and the mechanisms that can actually move, that have actually historically moved politics. So I don't, and the reason I don't talk about the state is I talk about removing the state is not because I'm scared that they'll come after me if I do it. It's just because Chesterton's fence tells me, if you remove that apparatus, it could be a hell of a lot worse than it is right now. See, people think that this is the worst it could be. You know, people look around and they're like, I'm being taxed out the ass. The age of consent law is only 16. This sucks. This is the worst it's ever been. Taxation is theft. This isn't the worst it's ever been. I mean, if you were an anarchist in Russia at the end of 1917, you were getting marched to a wall to be killed. Those were the first people who were killed. All right. Things can be much worse than they are right now. I just want to make them better. But I'm not one of these people who's like, I mean, oh, let's just throw everything out. Let's just get rid of everything. It's like, I mean, if we decided to rebuild this house, the foundation is phenomenal. I'm not going to tear apart the foundation. I'll just tear down, you know, what needs to be rebuilt.
On that note, your septic tank went out.
Oh, hey,
what are you doing for the bathroom?
Oh no, it's still working. We
okay.
just can't. If you flush it too often, you have to basically take that. But the good news is that I had to be a statist and get a permit for my own property to put in the septic tank. I mean, I could really, what I should have done was I should have just broken the law and just got some Mexicans to come out here and just put in a septic tank. But I went the statist route. But we got the permit today, and work starts on Monday, so that's great.
Okay,
yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
I'll let you go, but there was one thing I really wanted to talk to you about. So we'll do it real quickly. You've had kind of a, I don't know, a love. You've gone after James. What's his name?
Lindsay.
James Lindsay. Okay. And you wrote a Substack about it, which I thought was fantastic. And I think I see kind of I don't know if there's libertarians or even the right, they like to take people like RFK as an example, and they'll get used by these people rather than maybe using them. What's your deal with James Lindsay? You could say it as quick as you want. It's up to you. And what do you think should be done with him?
If you got time, I mean, I'll tell you exactly what's wrong with him. He's a leftist. He has said that classical liberalism is what's going to stop this left-wing authoritarian government. How? See, I don't believe that, if the housing crisis in 2008 taught you anything, it's that the majority of the people can want something done politically and still not get it. The overwhelming majority of people did not want the banks bailed out. The banks still got bailed out. We live, I believe in elite theory, that and so does Hans Hermann Hoppe, by the way. If you read any of his writings on elites, is there's always a small group of really powerful people who are willing to do what needs to be done to move politics and to make change. James Lindsay saying that classical liberalism hasn't even gotten started yet, and that's what's going to defeat left-wing authoritarianism. In my opinion, classical liberalism got us to where we are right now. And I also believe that classical liberalism is the genesis, and so does Ron Paul, of libertarianism. So when I look at the way what's happening right now, and I see James Lindsay talking about classical liberalism and also taking some of his quotes from the past and what he says, he goes to speak at pastors' conferences, ask him to come and speak. And he is an atheist who hates Christians. He's said this. You can look it up. You can go to his Twitter account and just search Christians. He also he said that he would rather the woke ideology, left woke ideology, keep going than right-wing authoritarianism step in to stop it. Well, I'm sorry, but
So why do you think the right seems to jump in? Is it because of the fake dissertations or whatever he submitted to the scientific journals to make a joke out of them? Is that why they've taken him under their wing, or he's taken them in a sense?
He shares like their opinion on one or two things, and the right is so used to losing that they'll glom on to anyone. It's just like libertarians. I mean, libertarians love James Lindsay. Why? Because you're so used to losing somebody who's in the mainstream, who has, a best-selling book and who can get on Fox News or something. Oh, we need to glom on to him. I mean, the guy's your enemy. If he won, like if his way won, I mean, I don't know that they would like come after someone like me, but I mean, you're just basically going to be right back to where we are right now within, a couple decades. Because I mean, the only reason that I believe that like we didn't have from the founding, why it took 200 years from the founding, 200 years plus from the founding to get to where we are now, is because, well, I mean, we were living in an analog world. Now we live in a digital world. Information just goes out there, and they're able to just blast. I mean, Bernaysian kind of propaganda all day long, and people eat it up. And a lot of times it's just people eating it up because they really are good people who want to do the right thing. And other times it's because they've bought into this New Deal and World War II kind of regime where anything too far right is evil. So they immediately, I think that's why libertarianism was so easily subverted by progressives at some point, is because, well, first of all, I think libertarianism does come from the left, not like Hoppian. Hoppe understands. I think Hoppe is really the only. If you're not a Hoppian, I mean, I don't. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you're basically a progressive who doesn't want taxes. I mean, you still hold the anti-racist, all this anti-racism in you, and you're, willing. I mean, to me, anyone who considers himself to be not a progressive and not with the regime, but calls people Nazis, to me, you're just a leftist. I mean, you're just using. Okay, here's one thing: using the left's language. James Lindsay uses the left's language. The right uses the left's language. Libertarians use the left's language. I'm not using the language of my enemy, the people that want me dead.
Do you have any? Scott Horton always says, "Argue to the right from the right, the left from the left." Is that almost something that you wouldn't do now? In a sense, but you're just like, it doesn't matter. Or I don't even know.
Well, first of all, like if I argue, if somebody tried to do that with me yesterday on Twitter, tried to argue the right from the right.
I saw that.
And they're a leftist. That doesn't mean I don't care. I want you dead. I mean, it's like literally, I want these people. I want these people enslaved. It's like, I mean, what do I care what they have to say? Now, if somebody on my side comes to me and they come to me privately and they're like, I think that's why I tell people, I don't know if you're really if you've been up on this whole thing. No enemies to the right.
No.
Have you been? Yeah, there was a big Twitter space yesterday. I think it almost went 3 hours and it had a lot of people in there, but this, my buddy, Charles Haywood, he came up with that idea. No enemies to the right. And no public enemies to the right until your enemy gets defeated. Then once and if that means Charles Haywood, doesn't consider himself a national socialist or a white nationalist, if that means that he's going to come together with those people to defeat the enemy we have, he's clearly said, well, then after we would defeat that enemy, we're going to have we're going to have to take care of some things between ourselves because I don't agree with you, which brings us back to secession. Just go build your own thing. That was the thing when you remember when Dave debated Nick Fuentes a couple years ago. Yeah. Nick Fuentes was talking about,
that's what got Ryan Dawson all worked up.
Yeah. But Dave was Nick is talking about, we need to we need to do this. I would love to take over Washington, D.C. and punish my enemies. It's just not going to happen. I just talk about it because that's the way it should be. That's the way it would eventually be done. But what people like Nick Fuentes should do if they want like a white nationalist thing is just go find some land somewhere, a town somewhere, and move into it and just basically take it over. And don't say you're fucking doing it. Don't advertise the fact that you're doing this because that the regime in charge considers you to be their mortal enemy. Just go do it.
Like the Right State Project, something like that.
Yeah, just go do it. It's like, I mean, I like a lot of people in the Free State Project, but I don't think the Free State Project is going to work because it's infiltrated by too many leftists. I just don't see. I mean, I've been to PorcFest and I've been to Liberty Forum. They're two biggest events. And I mean, the amount of people who are left wing there, who hate right wingers, who are part of that, who identify with it, is just. I forget, somebody said on Twitter the other day, they should have named it the Free County Project, because then you can have it where you have some people here, some people there, and then you have people who come together for who are like-minded. I mean, I just don't see in this world, and I wrote this in a Substack that I think I released on Friday. I just don't see in this world how you would want to have a neighbor or share a political polity with anyone who like hates you. We don't have to live that way. I mean, we shouldn't have to live that way. And people getting that through people's skulls is one of the hardest things. It's like trying to get people to read Anatomy of the State. It's like, okay, well, it's 60 pages. How many normies have the even the attention span to read 60 pages? Yeah, I mean,
Right.
When I was a libertarian and an ANCAP, how many people told me they were an ANCAP because of memes? They never read. I mean, they admitted to me clearly that they had never read a book. They had never done. I mean, and it's like, you don't really know your own theory. That's why I spent.
That goes everywhere, though. You would.
Yeah.
imagine.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I know a lot of people on the right who haven't read, people on the dissident right who haven't read Yaki, who haven't read Carl Schmitt. I mean, you don't even need to read Yaki. You need to read Carl Schmitt, because Carl Schmitt, as Paul Gottfried, Paul Gottfried learned how to speak German, learned how to learn German so that he could study Carl Schmitt in the original language, because it was that important to him. He understood that he was the most important political mind of the 20th century, probably of the last 400 or 500 years. And why? Because he understood what the modern state is. And the modern state is friend and enemy. That's it. You either consider somebody to be your enemy or you consider somebody to be your friend. That is what politics is. And until people get that through their minds, but it doesn't have to be that way if you start to try to break down into smaller sections, things like that.
I'm going to still ask you questions unless you need to go. Then we'll take out.
Good.
What's your definition of? Because you made me think of something here, and I don't know. What's your definition of left or right? And I'm thinking back. I remember Jonah Goldberg wrote the liberal fascism. I think it was. Yeah, and it was talking about the Nazis, basically, that they were from the left ideals, and you see the Crowder types that say that all the time. What is your and by the way, I think that's an easy Dinesh D'Souza type of thing of saying, oh, the Democrats are just the party of slavery or whatnot, and things change from their roots, but it's still also interesting and important to know those roots as well. The Star Spangled Banner written by a socialist type of thing. So what is your definition of left and right, and especially when it comes to the National Socialist, and what would you consider that a right wing? What is it, left wing? And what's the and is it too much to?
I mean, from the National Socialist point, I'd rather I think anti-egalitarianism is number one on the right.
Okay.
Anti-egalitarianism, hierarchy, understanding that hierarchy comes from nature. I don't think economics has anything to do with it. I see these political compasses, and they're basically, if you're okay with tariffs, or if you say that, if a corporation gets out of hand, the state should step in and crush them or make them split up or do anything like that, it automatically puts you on the left. I don't think economics has anything to do with it. To me, culture is everything. And to me, right wing is anti-egalitarianism. It is believing in order, and doing whatever it takes to have an orderly society is the most important thing. And I think that left wing is subjectivism, and it's chaos. It's three things mixed together. Two of them are really good: rationalism and intellectualism. They're really good. But then they get mixed. But then subjectivism gets mixed in with it. And when subjectivism gets mixed in with intellectualism and rationalism, you have what we have now. The world that we live in right now is those three things combined. And it's why when anyone wanted to argue with me that we have order, or that we actually have a proper civilization, I don't really know where to start with that conversation.
I mean, by your definition, and is communism kind of in there then? I mean,
well,
too much egalitarianism mixed in with
there's too much egalitarianism mixed in communism. Bolshevism definitely was not about order, was about
Well,
was
but
about
Bolshevism, I'm talking about the actual, Maoist or Leninist societies that we actually had. I mean, there seemed to be quite a amount of order.
well, if they, I mean, any group that's preaching equality, I mean, that equality comes from the left. Even Thomas Sowell says equality is a myth. A man isn't even equal with himself on different days. Yeah, I think equality and egalitarianism is definitely from the left, and it doesn't matter that the communists or the Bolsheviks couldn't achieve what they wanted. It was what their stated goal was, and whatever they became, well, that's what they became. I don't know.
Well, Pete, I appreciate you being on today. Can you tell everyone knows who you are, but where's the best place to go to find you, and what do you have coming up?
Pete Quiñones Show. Got an episode with Samuel Urban coming out tomorrow. We're looking at the woke phenomena from a purely anthropological standpoint, using anthropological definitions to try to figure out if it actually is a religion or not. Continuing series. Thomas and I are going to record part 2 of the World War I series this weekend. PeteSubstack.com. I got a Substack coming out tomorrow, which is, what did I do this one on? Oh yeah, basically praising any kind of tribes that are still living in the wilderness and don't know anything about what's going on in the world and how lucky they are.
I was just talking to my son. We were talking about some things last night about religion, and it's like, and I made the point of, my wife saying, hey, if it's against the Bible to be gay, as an example, are they going to still go to heaven? These are philosophical, whatever we have in our family. And I'm like, think about someone out in the bush. Are they going to go to, if you believe in heaven, are they going to go the fact that they've never been proselytized to, or they didn't know what the Bible, they don't know these things. I imagine possibly, unless they're just, I don't know if this matters at all, but once you know that everything and you're aware, and I guess this is maybe preaching even to the libertarianism, once you know the reality of the world, are you now required to adhere to those fundamentals in a sense?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but yeah, that's, I remember those arguments in seminary were always fun. Are the pygmies in South, if they never hear, are they going it's like, I don't, this is too much. It's too much, but something, my wife and I were talking about this yesterday when we were listening to John Harris on the Conversations That Matter podcast talking about the Trinity. And I said that my problem is that, when I examine the Trinity, there are definitely things there that are unexplainable. And I think the problem that so many religious arguments have is that some people are just afraid to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if people want to ask me how the Trinity works, who was Jesus praying to in the garden? I don't know how that works. I mean, I read Galatians chapter 2. It said that he gave up his divinity to become as a bondservant, and I mean, he asked if his Father's will be done. I mean, these are, if he's fully God and fully man, how does that happen? I think it's okay to say I have no clue. Right. I just have no clue. Well, that's a good thing about being a Catholic too. You just go to the catechism and you're like, okay, there you go. There's the answer.
There's the answer to everything. Maybe it's the vanity, right? My clients get in trouble when sometimes they're asked and they want to answer everything. And it's like, no. Sometimes I don't know. I don't recall. It's perfectly fine. Matter of fact, it's going to be better than whatever. Well, Pete, I really appreciate you coming in here.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to go out with the Star Spangled Banner because that's how we do it. Thanks everybody for check out our show.
That's a status song.
It is, but you know what? It's one I have in here. So thanks everybody for sticking around. Pete, I always appreciate it. Sometime. I was supposed to ask you, what's your favorite drink?
Alcohol or alcohol? Mixed drink. Oh man. I mean, I go for the classics, man. I really like a highball.
Okay, so when we get together, I'll try to get you one of the. I just go for beer. That's my thing.
Oh, I'm good with that too.
Okay. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Pete. Big appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hang on, Pete. I'll talk to you in the behind. This is a extra long outro that was unnecessary. Thanks.
No problem at all.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast. I can't find it anywhere. And they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke. Yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me, I'll...
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger. I just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But anyways,
boomer.